all of those kind of things as you go back through it. So it's a longer process for sure.
As far as information that you have on hand and knowledge of whatever facts may be known at that moment, how much information do you have working when you hit the ground out there? Do you have a lot of facts? Do you have a lot of knowledge of what happened?
Are you talking about this specific?
In general.
Just in general. It varies from scene to scene. Sometimes officers that arrive tell us very little because they don't have a lot, and then we go in and process and find additional evidence and things like that, because that's not their job to go through a crime scene and look for things like it is our job. So.
Okay, and in this case, did you have any information that you were working off of to help guide your analysis and investigation?
Yes.
Okay, what information were you working off of specifically?
The officers told us that there had been a shooting inside a vehicle. The victim had been transported to the hospital.
Okay, so you knew you were working a homicide and you knew you were working a shooting.
Correct.
How does that guide you once you get out there?
Well, you look for, of course, evidence of firearms being used, so fired cartridge cases, fired bullets, defects in the home or the building, wherever you are, the vehicles, everywhere, any additional injuries, any additional damage that wasn't initially found by the officers. And
you mentioned take photos is part of it. Is also making a diagram or a sketch also part of it?
Yes.
In this case, you said there were other crime scene analysts out there. You did not do a diagram in this case, but another crime scene, I believe he was an analyst or supervisor at the time, was out there as well. Is that correct? Do you recall that?
Yes.
And all of you kind of worked in conjunction, is that fair?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Now, Ms. Forming, when you were out there, did you kind of take lead on at least the processing and collecting of evidence out there at Royalton?
Yes.
And did you document that with photographs?
Yes, I did.
Now, prior to your testimony today, I think we met on the last day of school last year, or last fall.
Yes.
And we went through these, but if you wouldn't mind taking a look again, there'll be a few that are missing. They're going to be States Exhibits 9 through 93. Do you recognize all of those?
Yes.
And States Exhibit 9 would be the diagram that was done by Detective Pizan.
Yes.
But does it fairly and accurately depict the crime scene as it was on the 25th of May 2020?
Yes.
And as far as States Exhibits 9 through 93 previously admitted were 12, 16, and 18. Do you believe State's Exhibits 9 through 93 would aid this jury in understanding your testimony today?
Yes.
State would offer State's Exhibits 9 through 93, 12, 16, and 18 are previously been admitted, but offer these for all purposes.
No objection.
All right, State's Exhibits 9 through 93, excluding 12, 16, and 18 because they've already been admitted. But Exhibits 9 through 93 will be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, the State would also offer what's going to be marked as State's Exhibit 9A for demonstrative purposes only, which is just a blown up portion of the crime scene.
No objection.
All right, so State's Exhibit 9A will be admitted
For demonstrative, Your Honor.
for demonstrative purposes, yes.
Now, as far as processing a scene, Ms. Forbing, when you have a scene like in State's Exhibit number 9 that is located in a residential area, how do you begin your processing the scene? Or where do you start? What's the first spot?
The outers, usually where the address is located on the residence or the street sign.
Okay, and you've seen those have already been admitted, previously admitted.
Yes.
And do you kind of work from what you know to be the exterior in?
Yes.
Now, the photos that we've put into evidence, were a lot more, fair.
Yes.
But these are kind of a small sample size to show this jury what you observed and collected.
Yes.
So State's Exhibit 9 is the crime scene. Now, these numbers that are on, let's say 1 and 2 in the middle of the road, or 3, 4, 5 that are in the driveway, or 11 that's in the yard, what does each number indicate?
An item an item of evidence.
Okay, and when you say an item of evidence, I think earlier you used the word placard. What is a placard?
A placard is I'm sure you've seen the yellow numbers or letters that are stuck next to a piece of evidence for photographic purposes. So that is just the number of the placard that was next to that piece of evidence.
Sometimes you might not have a placard, but if you have placards, it's best practice to use the placards.
Yes.
And in this case, you did have the placards, and these numbers on State's Exhibit 9 would represent those placards.
Correct.
Okay, so State's Exhibit number 10, what is the purpose of this?
That is a card just to show who is taking the photographs, the date, the time, and the case number for the rest of the photographs to follow. They're all taken by this person.
Documentation purposes.
Yes.
State's Exhibit 11, we can kind of go through these pretty quickly, but State's Exhibit 11, what do we see here?
That is the exterior of the front of the house, I believe, where the shooting is, where that, I think on the side where the cars are, oh yeah, that's the car, I'm sorry.
And I'm gonna apologize, this screen right here
I'm
is
sorry.
cut off, so the screen to your right might be the easiest, and then you can reference, of course, State's Exhibit 9A. But do you see the three vehicles which have been on Azalea Lane in State's Exhibit 9A?
Yes.
State's Exhibit 12, just a photograph of the streets.
Yes, the location count, car
Alright.
streets.
And State's Exhibit 13, what do we have here?
So this is inside the crime scene now. These are the vehicles that are the vehicle that was involved in the homicide, the shooting.
Okay, 14, just moving in closer. State's Exhibit 15, what do we see on the ground here?
So these are little arrows that they give us to mark so we don't lose track of evidence prior to putting placards down. So you go through, walk through, put those arrows next to the evidence, and then go back and take all of your photos. So these are 2 items of evidence in the roadway.
Again, kind of just taking another photo of this. State's Exhibit 16 would be up towards the driveway of the house off of Azalea. 17. 18, what are we looking at here?
That is the driver's side of the vehicle that was shot, and it looks like medical equipment.
That we see there on the bottom portion of State's Exhibit 18.
Yes.
So now State's Exhibit 19, we've kind of gone back out and we see those 2 yellow placards. State's Exhibit 20, is that the placards, the number of placards you were referring to?
Yes.
Okay, and State's Exhibit number 1, what do we have there?
That would appear to be,
State's Exhibit 21, excuse me, placard number 1.
appears to be a fired bullet.
And State's Exhibit 22.
It appears to be another fired bullet.
And so both of those would have been in State's Exhibit 9A, the 2, number 1 and number 2, as they correspond to your placards.
Yes.
And then now when we look up the driveway in State's Exhibit 23, we see you've put out additional placards on the driveway.
Correct.
State's Exhibit 3, what do we have here? State's Exhibit 26, placard number 3, what do we have here?
That is a fired cartridge case.
And State's Exhibit 27, what are you doing in this picture specifically?
Just taking a photograph of the head stamp on the fired cartridge case.
State's Exhibit 29, what do we have photographed here?
Appears to be glass.
Now something like that, why would you take a photo of glass right there?
It would suggest the vehicle was in the driveway when the glass was broken.
State's Exhibit 30 and 31, 31 being a close-up of placard number 5, what do we have there?
A fired cartridge case.
And State's Exhibit 32, which is going to be a zoomed-in photo, correct,
Correct.
of the back end. Now, you are not a firearms expert or an analyst, correct?
Correct.
In State's Exhibit 33, what do we see in the graphs?
Evidence marker number 11.
Your Honor, I'm going to add a smaller photo of State's Exhibit number 32 to what has been marked as State's Exhibit 445, which is a demonstrative aid.
So this is a smaller version of 32 that's already displaying, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
And what do we have there in State's Exhibit 35 and a close-up in 36?
A fired cartridge case.
Now we go back down to the vehicle. in State's Exhibit number 38, you have a number of placards. In 39, we start to zoom in on them. What do we have at number 6?
A black visor, or a visor, sorry.
And underneath it, medical.
I believe it was medical equipment from DFR, Dallas Fire Rescue.
Now, when you arrived, was Dallas Fire and Rescue still there, or were they already gone?
They were already gone.
State's Exhibit 10, 9, 8, and 7. State's Exhibit 7 will start, or sorry, State's Exhibit 41, which shows placards 7, 8, 9, and 10, starting with State's Exhibit 42 and placard number 7. What do we have there?
A fired cartridge case.
43 is just a close-up. State's Exhibit 44, placards 9 and 8. State's Exhibit 45 showing a close-up of number 8. What do we have there?
A fired cartridge case.
46 would be at the back of that one.
Yes.
What's the purpose of taking a picture of the back of the fired cartridge cases?
For us, the purpose is to get the make and model, or the make and the caliber of the fired cartridge case.
And you would notate that within your reports that you have.
Yes.
State's Exhibit 47 down there in the crack. What do you have there?
Fired cartridge case.
State's Exhibit 48, close-up of it. State's Exhibit 49, placard number 10.
It's also a fired cartridge case. Stamp.
Now, State's Exhibit 51 and 52, as we move around the vehicle, do you process, or how do you process a vehicle? Do you process it just like you would the scene, exterior in, or how does that work?
Exterior in, generally. Of course, situational.
Now, of course, we can see from these photos that there appears to be rain and water on the ground. How does that affect your ability to process a scene as a crime scene analyst?
It can contaminate some of the evidence, especially on the exterior of the vehicle. So generally, we would do what we could on scene and then transport it to a more secure, dry location to process the rest of it.
Number one, we want to photograph it as is and then take it somewhere to process it further.
Correct.
And is that what was done in this case?
Yes.
State's Exhibit 52, what do we see here?
That is the rear driver's side of the vehicle, the broken window.
And again, you kind of move in and out of photographing specific areas like your vehicle as well, correct?
Correct.
State's Exhibit 54, what are you photographing here?
The rear end of the vehicle.
State's Exhibit 55, just a close-up.
Correct.
Now, when you transport a vehicle like the one in State's Exhibit 57, how is it transported?
It's towed to the Dallas Police Auto Pound.
How can that affect the appearance, or appearance might not be the right word, but how can it affect a piece of evidence like a vehicle once it's transported?
Well, things get moved around, of course, in transport, and the glass would be more broken, things like that.
Or completely shattered
Or
down?
completely gone, yes.
Not uncommon.
No.
State's Exhibit 57, still moving around the vehicle. State's Exhibit 59, what do we see here?
That is the front passenger door, open with shattered window.
And as we move in State 60 and 61, what do we have here?
It would be a defect in the shattered window.
I'm going to come back to this a little bit later, State's Exhibit 62, but why was this photo important to you?
It appears there's a defect in the exterior of the door.
I don't know if it's going to work, so I'm just going to walk up here.
Yes.
And then you use, what would you call this?
Those are stickers that we, to label, it's basically a placard, but for any defects that we may have. Because obviously the yellow placards won't sit on the side of a vehicle or a wall. So we use stickers and label them differently for everybody. I label mine with letters.
And as we look at State's Exhibit 64, here you can see you've labeled the one in the door, A, and then another one up here, which would be, I don't know what panel you call this, or frame, the A or the first post of the car, correct?
Yes,
And that's labeled as B.
yes,
And you would continue to start far out and move in, as we see in State's Exhibit 65.
correct.
66 is B, and then on the hood, we have 67, which is another photo of which you have described these as defects. What is a defect?
Any kind of damage, basically. It appears to be a bullet hole, but I'm not qualified to make that call, so. We call them defects if we're not qualified, basically. So.
Okay, so that is just a common term for something that seems like
Damaged.
damage.
Mhm.
And then take a photograph of the VIN number for documentation purposes.
Correct.
Interior of the vehicle now, State's Exhibit 71, you take photos of the driver or the passenger side window on the inside.
Correct.
Is there anything significant about State's Exhibit number 72 as far as the glass on the windowsill? Does that suggest anything to you as a crime scene analyst?
Yes, it suggests that it was exiting the inside of the vehicle.
Sorry, if that's on the interior of the car.
Correct.
Okay.
Like it was going into the vehicle, yes.
That's sorry.
Yeah.
Coming into the car.
Yes.
And then State's Exhibit number 75, we have another defect, which is marked as D in State's Exhibit 78. Would this be an example of something that, like, hey, we're not going to process the inside of the center console right now due to the weather conditions?
Correct.
Document it, notate it, we will do it later on.
Yes.
State's Exhibit 81, looking at the rear side of, or the rear seats of the victim's car. What is significant about this photo?
There is glass on the rear seats inside the vehicle.
State's Exhibits 84 and 85. When we met, I don't know if we had discussed this or not, but as far as the position in State's Exhibit 86 of the gear shift, do you see what position the gear shift is in?
Yes.
And what position is that?
Drive.
Also on State's Exhibit 85 and 86, was there a phone located in the vehicle?
Yes.
What would you have done with that phone?
I would have collected it and placed it in property or released it to the detective on scene. And in this case, the detective on scene requested it. It was
Alright.
released.
Yeah, Brett.
Yes.
I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 525. Do you recognize this?
I don't, but I'm sure photo-wise.
Yep. So that's 525, correct?
Yes.
On the interior here, what are we looking at in State's Exhibit 89?
That appears to be at least a fragment of a fired projectile or bullet.
Now, State's Exhibit 91, the vehicle's been moved. Previously, we didn't see placard 14, but now we do. Do you continue to canvass once the vehicle's been moved?
Yes.
And State's Exhibit 92, what do we have here?
A fired cartridge case.
As far as the location of all these fired cartridge cases, as well as what is in the gutter underneath the car, what's in the driveway, and what's in the street, as an analyst, does that suggest anything to you?
It suggests someone was shooting into the vehicle.
Okay. And as far as angle-wise or anything like that, does that mean anything to you? Or does it suggest anything to you as far as the location of all these fired cartridge cases?
It suggests that someone was shooting in from the the driver's side, and also someone was shooting in from the front passenger side.
Okay, so shots into both sides of the vehicle,
Correct.
based on location of fired cartridge cases, as well as what you've observed with the vehicle.
Correct.
Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
This foregoing on showing has been marked as State's Exhibits 514 through 524. Please take a look at those. Do you recognize State's Exhibits 514 through 524?
Yes.
And what are State's Exhibits 514 through 524?
Appear to be fired bullets and fired cartridge cases.
Okay. And those were the ones that you collected at Royalton on May 25th, 2020?
Yes.
State would offer State's Exhibits 514 through 524 for all purposes.
No objection.
All right, State's Exhibits 514 through 524 will be admitted.
After you left the address on Royalton, when did you next process the vehicle?
On May 26th of 2020.
And as far as what processing was done, were you the only person out there processing the vehicle, or were there others involved with you?
There were others involved.
What was your role on the 26th as far as processing this vehicle?
I believe I took some photographs and I collected a fired, what appeared to be a fired bullet from the middle console.
I'm going to show you what's been marked. I believe we went through previously. State's Exhibits 94 through 115. I'll take a look. Do you recognize these?
Yes,
And are these the photos that you took on 5/26 of 2020?
yes,
And they're a smaller portion of all the photos, but the representative photos of the vehicle that day, correct?
correct,
As far as State's Exhibit 513, do you recognize State's Exhibit 513?
yes.
What is State's Exhibit 513?
Appears to be a fired bullet.
And would that be the bullet that you collected on the 26th of May 2020?
Yes,
Your Honor, this time State would offer State's Exhibits 94 through 115 and State's Exhibits 5 and State's Exhibit 513 for all purposes.
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, so State's Exhibits 94 through 115 will be admitted, and then State's Exhibit 513 will be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Permission to publish?
You may.
All right, State's Exhibit 94, sorry. This old fashioned one. Okay, State's Exhibit 94. Every time you photograph, whether it be at a scene or back at Bellevue, where you process vehicles, you always do one of these.
correct,
And this would be just a cover photo of name, date, what was photographed, the case number.
correct,
Okay, and State's Exhibit 95, just the front of the Infinity after it was towed. 96 would be the VIN number. Now, the State's Exhibit's 97, and then 98 now. Here in State's Exhibit 98, we see that the window is actually completely, well, not completely, but mostly gone.
correct,
That would be due to transport.
yes,
And the same, State's Exhibit 99, which would be the rear windshield, or rear window, correct?
yeah, yes.
Now, State's Exhibit 100, what do we see? In the middle of the photo?
Appears to be a defect.
State's Exhibit 101, just a close-up of the defect,
Yes,
again suggesting that shot into the car.
correct,
State's Exhibit 102, moving to the right corner, or right rear passenger, and then in State's Exhibit 103, moving to the right front passenger side window. Again, the majority of the window is now falling out due to the defect that was in it, correct?
correct,
But here now we see State's Exhibit 103, which is number A, or letter A, excuse me. Again, moving around 104 to the front, right passenger side to the wheel, 105. Again, you're just documenting all of the different angles of the vehicle as is, but now you're in a more contained, I guess, environment. Is that fair?
Correct, and the differences between the scene and
Sure.
documenting the windows and things like that, yes.
States Exhibit 106, actually going into the trunk. States Exhibit 107. Was the purpose of this to try and see if you were able to obtain anything from that possible defect in the back?
Correct, to see if it went through.
Sometimes are there defects and you never find bullets
Yes,
or projectiles?
correct, yeah.
States Exhibit number 108 would be the defect inside the right front passenger into the center console.
Yes,
109, a close-up. And then 110, what do we see going on here in States Exhibit number 110?
the panel has been removed to attempt to retrieve the projectile.
States Exhibit 111. States Exhibit 112, just continuing to work your way inside and documenting your way inside of that panel.
Correct,
States Exhibit 113, more documentation of it.
yes.
States Exhibit 114. What do we have there?
It appears to be a fired bullet or projectile.
And would that have been the projectile or bullet that we had in States Exhibit, I believe, what was 513 that I just showed you?
Yes,
Again, States Exhibit 115 would just be a close-up of that, and then you actually collect it.
correct.
Now, Ms. Forbing, if you wouldn't mind, if you need to refresh your memory by looking at your notes, please feel free. How many fired cartridge cases did you collect in total out at the Royalton address? And in total, how many bullets or projectiles did you collect?
8 fired cartridge cases. 3 fired bullets or projectiles.
And if 4 from inside the vehicle, correct?
Correct.
So a total of 4 bullets or
Yeah,
projectiles.
yes, I'm sorry, I thought you meant just on the scene. Total for the case, yes, 4, sorry.
4 bullets in total
Yes,
and 8 fired cartridge cases.
correct.
Now, you don't do any expert analysis as far as firearms and tool marking analysis or anything like that?
No,
That is not part of your training.
no.
I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
Ms. Ewer?
Ms. Forbing, were you present when the trajectory was done on the car, the dowel rods and things of that nature?
Yes,
You're not here to testify to that, though?
no, ma'am.
Okay. In regards to a crime scene, you would agree with me that one of the most difficult things is a crime scene staying pristine for when you arrive. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
A lot of officers, civilians, everybody walking or running around the scene can cause a lot of damage to potential evidence that you collect.
Correct.
So example, when we look at the different placards for where you found the fired cartridge casings, that's where you found them, but you're not here to tell the jury that's where they were before anybody walked through that scene.
Correct.
And may I just grab some evidence, Judge? You may. So looking at State's Exhibit 38, that front driver's window had no defects to it. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
State's Exhibit 40, the windshield had no defects to it. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
The prosecutor asked you about the car being in gear, and you indicated that the gear shift was in drive. Is that accurate?
Yes, ma'am.
You don't know how it was placed in drive?
No, ma'am.
When you processed the scene and made the diagram, did you note if there was any slope to the driveway?
I did not make the diagram.
I'm sorry, you testified to the diagram being a true and accurate copy, or a true and accurate depiction, even though it was made by Detective Bazan.
Correct.
But since you testified it was a true and accurate picture, or a true and accurate representation of that area, did you note whether or not there was any slope in the driveway?
I did not note that because I didn't make the diagram.
I'll pass this witness.
All right, is there anything further for this witness?
There.
All right, anything further? Okay, may this witness be released?
I would say subject to recall just in case.
Okay, so, we understand you're not with the department anymore, however, you are subject to recall, so as long as you have your cell phone, if either of the lawyers or parties want to call you back, you will have to come back.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And Stacy, you may call your next witness.
State will call Officer Lozano. State will call Courtney Lozano. I'm sorry, to be more specific, crime scene supervisor Courtney Lozano.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Could you please raise your right hand for me? Do you so solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
All right, thank you. Have a seat for me. And you'll recall that the microphone moves up and forth, back and forth, but the seat does not.
Yes.
Okay? All right, Mr. Adams?
Good afternoon, Ms. Lozano.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Fantastic. Would you mind introducing yourself to this jury and please spell your name for the court reporter?
Yes, my name is Courtney Lozano. It's going to be Courtney. Last name Lozano, Lozano, and I am a crime scene supervisor with the Dallas Police Department.
Now, Ms. Lozano, how long have you been employed with the Dallas Police Department?
Just over 4 years.
In the capacity that you currently serve as crime scene supervisor, how long do you maintain that position?
I've been a supervisor since I started at Dallas Police Department.
Did you have any experience prior to coming to the Dallas Police Department as far as being in crime scene analysis or technician?
Yes, I worked for the Orange County Sheriff's Office in Orlando, Florida prior to coming to Dallas.
And how long did you work with the Orange County Sheriff's Department in Florida?
I worked there for 3 years.
As far as your training and experiences in crime scene, what specific training do you have in regards to crime scenes and specifically with dowel rods and what you'll be testing and buying about today?
I have received multiple different trainings in shooting reconstruction, which entails the dowel rods and the ballistic determination. Some of those were in-house at my old agency in Orange County, and then I've also been to advanced trainings, which are external 40-hour training classes on shooting reconstruction.
Do you continue to take those courses or actually teach any of those courses?
Yes, I do both. I just recently went to the advanced training that was in February of this year, and then I continually teach the shooting reconstruction aspect.
As far as this case, what you're here to testify about, what was your involvement and what role did you have as far as working at the crime scene?
So my only involvement was requested to go to our autopound, the Dallas Police autopound, respond to the vehicle to conduct trajectory analysis on the holes if available.
And were there other crime scene analysts there also performing duties at the autopound? I mentioned Vilbig earlier, that's the location.
Yes, that's correct.
Were there other analysts there performing any tasks or duties?
Yes, there was the crime scene analyst, Kylie Forbing, and then there was one of our technicians, crime scene technician, Kayla Gomez. They were both there present.
Now, this jury just heard from Ms. Forbing, but walk us through firearm or shooting reconstruction and what goes into that and the training that goes into learning how to do shooting reconstruction.
So shooting reconstructions were basically analyzing the path of the projectile or the bullet as it discharged from a firearm. So I'm not necessarily looking at the position of a shooter, we're looking at where the firearm was discharged from. In this case, the scene had been removed, so the vehicle was not in its original location. So I'm analyzing the bullet holes. You're looking to see if the bullets, if you kind of picture crosshairs on a bullet, you're trying to determine if it came left or right of one angle and then above and below another angle. So you're looking at a 90 degrees and then what did it differentiate from that 90 degrees is basically the analysis that we're looking at.
How do, this jury's now heard of dowel rods, and we've mentioned it, what are dowel rods?
In this case, dowel rods are a metal, it's a firm metal stick. It does not have any give into the slack of it, so it will provide a correct angle whenever you take a measurement using an angle finder.
As far as a dowel rod is concerned, how do you know a dowel rod is the right type of rod to use on a vehicle?
So there's variations in dowel rod sizes, so it depends on the entrance hole of the bullet itself. Also, if sometimes there is a larger hole and the dowel rod will not stay, there are devices called centering cones. Basically, it stabilizes the rod into the center of the hole, whichever way the hole came through, it will actually center it into the center of the hole.
As far as your training in shooting reconstruction, the use of dowel rods, do you have any other training or experience such as tool mark examinations or comparing fired cartridge cases or bullets?
No, I do not.
So specifically in this case, it was just, you were called out just to do the shooting, not even shooting reconstruction, was just to work the dowel rods and give angles.
Yes, that is correct.
And you and I have had some conversations that can get very technical, and I don't want to get that complicated in here. So do you photograph the actual processing and the measurements that you're taking out there at the scene, or in this case at the auto pound?
So we photograph the actual placement of the dowel rods. The measurements themselves are just utilized with different type of measuring tools, so that part is not photographed, but the actual dowel rod placement is photographed.
Did you document and photograph that in this case?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
any, what's marked as states exhibits 116 through 125. Would you mind taking a look at those and letting me know if you recognize those?
Yes, I do.
Are these a fair and accurate depiction of the photos, or are these exact copies or duplicates of the photos that you took out of the building?
Yes, it is.
They're not all the photos, but a small representative portion.
Correct.
Says, offer states exhibits 116 through 125. 116 through 125 for all purposes.
No objection.
All right, State's Exhibits 116 through 125.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let me go ahead and give us a break. I understand we're about to go through some more photos. So if I can, first did we get, before we do that, I wanna make sure, Ms. Ewer, did you have the opportunity to review those photos?
I did, no objections to
All right, and so we will admit, State's Exhibits 116 through 125. And when we come back from our break, we will proceed with the photos that have been admitted.
All right.
And we'll take about a 10-minute break, so ladies and gentlemen, if y'all push that red button, then we'll know you're all back. You can all be seated. And if you want to step off to take your break, you can.
Thank you.
direct examination, sorry.
Okay, so, Ms. Lozano, State's Exhibit number 116. What are we looking at here in State's Exhibit 116?
This would be the passenger side of the vehicle with a dowel rod stuck into the bullet hole labeled as scale A.
And I'm going to apologize because I know you're probably used to checking both screens. This screen is not in full, so that's probably it cuts off on both sides a little bit.
Okay.
The State's Exhibit number 117. What do we see here?
That is a close-up of the scale A bullet hole with the dowel rod and the centering cone in place.
And again, explain this centering cone to the jury.
The centering cone is going to stabilize the dowel rod. That means when the dowel rod was first inserted, there was a little bit of movement, which would have caused alterations to the measurements that were taken. So the centering cone will actually stabilize the dowel rod into the center of the bullet hole, which is the measurements we're taking it from.
Now, when it comes to dowel rods and centering cones and potential of movement once you insert a dowel rod, why is it that you might have some movement when you put the dowel rod into the defect or bullet hole?
It depends on how the bullet enters the vehicle or the substrate that it's actually coming in contact with. So the bullet sometimes can go through some type of rotation, and also the medium in which the bullet hits will cause different heat events. So sometimes when a bullet hits a metal surface, the metal will actually travel with the bullet. So that is why you kind of have what we call like a coning effect, where it's a little bit larger and then it gets smaller. So the metal's traveling with the bullet, which can cause the variation in sizes of the bullet hole entrances, depending on the angle and then what substrate it's hitting as well.
Does the caliber of the bullet matter as well?
It can have an effect on the size, but it does not determine how the bullet actually interferes with the medium it hits.
As far as like the size of the defect, though, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. Because what you're worried about is the center of the defect, correct?
Correct.
The size of the defect itself, the centering cone, if it's a 40 caliber or something like that, or 9mm, it could cause a different defect size. Fair?
Yes, that's correct.
If I shoot through a transposed object and then that bullet from whatever caliber, a 9 or a 40 or whatever, goes through a transposed object and then into another structure, being a vehicle, a wall, whatever, that can also have an effect on the hole or the defect that you are looking at, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And that's why you're using these cones.
Yes, that's correct.
State's Exhibit number 118. What is this?
That is a top-down view, so looking down the dowel rod to show the angle at which it entered the vehicle.
And then State's Exhibit number 119.
That is the inside of the front passenger door, and that's a dowel rod coming from scale A into the vehicle.
And again, that's 118 and 119. That is the same dowel rod, which gives you the angle, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Based off of the placement of this dowel rod and the centering cone, what were your ultimate measurements that you had for this dowel rod?
May I refer to my report?
Please.
For the trajectory of scale A, the dowel rod, it was determined to be 7 to 9 degrees above the horizontal plane and 33 degrees to the right of vertical towards the hood.
Okay. I'm gonna break that down for us.
So the horizontal plane is we're looking at this type of measurement. So I'm trying to determine if it came above the horizontal plane or below the horizontal plane. So in this case, it's 7 to 9 degrees above the horizontal. So that means I know it was coming at a downward angle. The 33 to the right of vertical, so I'm looking at my vertical angle, and I'm just trying to determine if it came from the left side or the right side of vertical. So here it came 33 degrees to the right of vertical, which was towards the hood. So I know that it came from the hood or the front of the vehicle at a downwards angle.
Your arm, I have broken.
You may.
Here in State's Exhibit 9A, now I know you did not go out to 6130 Royalton, and I know on 9A in State's Exhibit 9 it says 3130, but the actual address in regards to this offense was 6130. Here in 9A, if we're looking at vehicle A, can you kind of explain where this dowel rod would have been and kind of the angle? Can you use that as an object to use, or is that too challenging?
Are you able to confirm which direction the car is facing?
So this is the front, if this is the front windshield,
Mhm.
closest to the 14 or the 9, and this is the, by the 7 would be the front drivers.
Okay.
So closest to 6100 Azalea would be the front passenger where you're taking that measurement. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So kind of in this area.
Yes.
Can you explain that to the jury while looking at 9A?
Yes. Am I allowed to?
Please, Judge Mishi.
You may.
So if this is the passenger side, this is the front passenger door. So that means that the trajectory of the dowel rod shows the angle coming from the front of the vehicle here at a slight downwards angle. So it would have been coming down this direction. So again, this is a little bit below the side mirror. So it's coming from the front down below the side mirror into the front passenger door.
And would that be consistent with somebody standing in front of a car, kind of 45 angle, I'm using an angle, but to the front and right of the car?
So based on the actual vertical, we're stating that it's 33 degrees from the right. So if you kind of do a relative math equation, you can do a calculation to show that from 90 degrees from the front, someone was standing this direction. So relatively, oh, maybe I'm making me do math on stand. 57 degrees from the front of the vehicle. So his analogy of 45 degrees, it's going to be a little bit more than that, but yes, it would be someone standing towards the front at about 57 degrees.
And then shooting, or at least the projectile is traveling in a downward, up to down motion.
Yes, that is correct.
State's Exhibit 120 is just the same entrance of that dowel rod, but a different angle photo of it. Is that fair?
Yes, that would be the exit.
Into the vehicle.
Yes, correct.
Now here in State's Exhibit 121, what do we have? And also again in 122.
That is the bullet hole C that's located on the passenger side of the hood.
And State's Exhibit 123.
That is a shot from on top of the bullet hole showing the dowel rod movement in the hole.
And then backing out in State's Exhibit number 124, what do we see here?
That is an overall shot of the 3 bullet holes that I had analyzed that day. So C is the one that you see on the passenger side door. C is on the hood, A is on the passenger side door, and then B is the scale that is marked on the A pillar.
A pillar. Thank you. I was trying to get that term earlier and I completely forgot. The A pillar of the vehicle. Underneath the hood in State's Exhibit 125, what do we have a photo of there?
That is the underside of the hood, and that would be the exit from scale C.
Now, you said the 3 different defects or holes that you looked at. What was, you've talked about A and C, and we'll get to your findings on C here in a second, but there's no dowel rod in 2B, is that correct?
That is correct.
Why do we not see a dowel rod in B?
So to conduct trajectory analysis with the dowel rods, the dowel rod has to be supported So if there is not an exit, or if the hole itself does not support a dowel rod, then one will not be inserted, so measurements would not be taken.
And so in this case, could not put a dowel rod in, can't do a measurement.
That's correct.
Now moving back over to C, what were your ultimate findings based on the measurements that you took here?
May I refer to my report?
Please.
C was shown to have 0-degree movement on the horizontal plane and 35 degrees to the left of vertical towards the passenger side.
Now, can you again explain that using vehicle A in State's Exhibit 9A next to you?
Yes. May I stand?
Please.
So for a 0-degree angle for the horizontal, that means that the way that the firearm was discharged was that it was perpendicular to the plane itself, so there was no movement above or below, so it was not being shot downwards or upwards, it was very relatively straight. So it would have been coming this direction with the 35 degrees to the left, so 35 towards this way of the passenger side, so it would have been this relative direction without any movement above or below, so no downwards angle or upwards angle.
Again, consistent with somebody in front of the vehicle.
Yes, that's correct.
Ms. Forbing, I believe, was the one who put A, B, and C on there, is that correct?
Yes, she did.
And then you notate when we see on there top or front, or is that you that writes that on those photos, or on the A, B, and C?
Yes, I did the up arrow and then the marking front for the vehicle.
Okay. Now, as far as marking A, B, C, D, however many an object might have, but in this case, A, B, and C, that is not to indicate the order of shots or when the vehicle was hit, A being first, B being second, C being third. That is just how y'all keep track. Is that fair?
That's correct. It's just personal preference for the way that they're labeled.
In this case, there, Ms. Forbing has testified to defects to the windows. The windows are gone. Would you, even if the windows were there with defects in the windows, would you have been able to do any dowel rod analysis on a passenger window or a rear passenger window?
Glass is usually very difficult to determine angle determination. You mostly have to have a secondary hole, so some type of other hole within the vehicle in order to do analysis. Most you could do is usually determine which direction the fire or the shot came from.
And what do you typically do to determine that?
You just look at the glass, you look at the different types of cracks associated, either radial cracks or concentric cracks is what we're analyzing for glass.
And if the glass goes into the car or out of the car?
Yeah, but a lot of times when glass breaks, you'll have it on both in and out anyways, so most of the time you're actually having to look at the glass fractures themselves, and sometimes you can see kind of how the metal coned in. A lot of times glass, it cones outwards, so as a bullet travels out of glass, it will actually expel the glass outwards, whereas metal, it kind of brings it in a little bit closer, the glass kind of expels it outward.
I'll pass it.
All right, thank you. Ms. Earl?
Thank you. Ms. Lozano, in a lot of the discussion when you were pointing at the diagram, where you talk about how far or where somebody is standing, when you point on that diagram, you keep pointing like by the 14 or putting a finger somewhere in that direction. But you're putting that person or that, I guess that coming from that direction on that, premised on that's where the car was when it was shot. Is that correct?
When I place it on that, I'm just using it as showing as the passenger side, not the actual location of where someone was standing.
So when you were putting your finger up there, you're not trying to tell this jury you have any idea where any shooter was standing in this case?
That is correct. I did not go to the scene.
You don't have any idea if the car was moving, if the shooter was moving, you don't have any idea on any of those facts either.
That is correct.
And in regards to the windows, obviously prior to being transported, it would have been possible for someone to have examined the windows in order to, as you described, look for that outward effect from the bullet going through the glass, correct?
I'm unsure what the condition of the windows were prior to being towed.
Nobody asked you to look at any pictures?
No, ma'am.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Mrs. Lana, I'm showing you States Exhibit 70, 71, 72, 73, which I think all show that front passenger window. Is there anything you could tell the jury about looking at those pictures?
It's a little difficult to see, but it does appear in 72 specifically, the outward coning or beveling of the window. I believe this is the door open, would be that the projectile traveled from the outside or the exterior of the vehicle to the interior based on the way that this glass has been fractured.
And you mentioned that it's difficult to tell in the picture. Surely someone could have gone out to the scene and looked at it out there, is that correct?
If someone was available for it, yes.
And then showing you States Exhibits 81, 82, these are kind of mixed in together, 82, 83, and 84, just show the passenger, back passenger window as well as the rear windshield. Anything you can tell us about anything those pictures might show?
These do not appear to have any specific detail about the direction of travel or how they might have been broken.
I know that you didn't do the crime scene processing, but just in general, for example, when you talk about A, B, and C, that's not in any order, correct?
That is correct.
That's the order in which you process them, each defect, but not necessarily the order in which they occurred.
That is correct.
And is that the same way at a crime scene, whenever you've gone out to a crime scene, when you find any evidence that you're going to collect and put placard numbers next to the various pieces of evidence, is that just how you find it or just where you decide to start and then you number your evidence from there? It's not necessarily a reflection of the order of anything.
Correct. Most of the time it's, they place it based on a starting point, and then from that point is the continuation of numbering.
So in this case, when we look at the state's exhibit up there, that 1 and 2 in the upper right-hand side, and then we see they went down the driveway 3, 4, 5, 6. So that was just a natural path of how 4 being worked the scene.
That would be correct.
And I believe you said the trajectory of the front passenger door defect was slightly downward, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And how high up from the ground was that defect?
May I refer to my report?
Yes, ma'am.
From the ground, it was measured 29 inches up.
And then it's directed downward at an angle of, is that?
It's 7 to 9 degrees.
And then you have a protractor and angle finder. What's the difference there?
They are used simultaneously to take the same measurement for horizontal. An angle finder will actually give you a dial that provides it, whereas a protractor, you're using a old-fashioned measuring device with a protractor. It will kind of provide you the little bit of, I guess, range associated with it. So that's why we get the 7 to 9. So it could have been 7 with a protractor, 9 with the angle finder. Let me confirm with my notes. It was, yes, 7 degrees with the protractor and 9 with the angle finder. So it would have just been a little bit of movement with the two measuring devices.
And then the defect that was in the hood, you said had no downward or upward. It was a flat, so to speak, follow the horizon.
Yes, that is correct.
I'll pass this witness.
Any more questions?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Ms. Lozano, to start, I want to start where defense asked you in regards to the front right passenger window. And I believe it was 72 and 73, in which you stated it was consistent with it outside the vehicle to inside the vehicle. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
States Exhibit 70, again, showing that same defect, again, consistent with outside the vehicle coming into the vehicle,
Yes, that's correct.
which would have been consistent with defects A and C that you analyzed at the auto impound, correct?
A and C, yes.
And I guess B and pillar A, which was unable to be analyzed due to being unable to place a dowel rod inside of the defect, correct?
Correct. I did state for B that, sorry, let me just make sure that. Because there we go. Since B entered the passenger side pillar, that it would have also traveled from the exterior to the interior, or towards the interior, but did not make the interior.
Right, because there's nothing inside the vehicle going out through the front A pillar.
Yes,
That would have created B.
yes, that is correct.
Now, when it came to the back left driver's window and the rear windshield, that defense has asked you about out at the scene, and your response was that based on what you're looking at, you can't make a determination.
Yes, that is correct.
Can you explain again, because I might have missed it, how you talked about metal versus glass when it's hit with a bullet, the difference in how it reacts?
So when a projectile travels through metal, a lot of times the metal, because of its, I guess, more toughness associated with it, as the projectile travels through, the metal kind of conform to the position of the projectile. So you can kind of picture a cone going this direction, it gets wider where the bullet impacts the metal, and then it gets smaller as it exits. Whereas glass, due to the surface of glass, once it strikes the glass and as it exits the glass, it takes the glass with it. So a lot of times the entrance is smaller and then the exit is wider, kind of blowing the glass outwards. So it's the opposite type of cone effect than we would see with the metal.
So in that situation where a bullet strikes glass, and you testified earlier under direct examination about having a secondary defect, shoot through glass into something, that might help provide you with a better trajectory if you had that secondary defect, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
State's Exhibit 52 is one of the photos that crime scene analyst Orbing took, and you're unable to make a determination of if it were from what side, correct?
That is correct.
Can you even see exactly where the back left passenger was shot?
I
Or back
do,
left driver's side was shot, excuse me.
I do not see a definitive hole.
And State's Exhibit 28, in referencing State's Exhibit 9A, do you see placard 4 in State's Exhibit 28, and do you see the number 4 on State's Exhibit 9A to your left?
Yes, I do.
Hypothetically, if I'm standing outside of a vehicle and I shoot into a vehicle, is it possible to get glass on both sides, both the inside and the outside?
Yes, it is.
If car A were in the driveway in 9A, in this area of 4, and you shot into that back driver's side window, is it possible to have both the results that we see in 52, where you have glass on the interior of the vehicle as well as the exterior of the vehicle in the driveway?
Yes, it is.
If hypothetically the vehicle were to reverse out and then drive and to strike another vehicle, would that alter, potentially alter the glass and your ability to make any measurements or make any determinations on trajectory?
Yes, any movement of glass would cause it to be disrupted.
So if the car was originally here and then ended up here, that would potentially alter it and make it either not perfect or completely unable to make any type of determination.
It could.
And in fact, when State's Exhibit 52, had you been there at the scene that day, would you been able to make any type of determination had you gone to the scene that day?
Looking at this picture, I would say no, I would not have been able to.
Showing you has been marked as State's Exhibit number 4, which is a photo of the vehicle as it is in State's Exhibit 9A. Were you able to determine when defense was showing it to you even where exactly in 55 or 56 exactly where the bullet would have entered?
You can see a general with the cracks, the fracture lines. You can see a general area, but it's hard to determine the actual pinpoint location because it has been damaged.
Okay. Now you say you can determine generally, but you can't give a measurement, correct?
No, you would just have to take a general to the center of the entire defect.
But as it relates to State's Exhibit 55, is that going inwards or outwards?
I'm unable to tell from this photo.
Would hypothetically the car moving from the street or from the driveway to the street affect that ability again as well?
Yes, it would.
Showing you State's Exhibit number 56. Do you see that? State's Exhibit 56?
Yes, I do.
Do you see this little kind of light brown or tan color?
Yes, I do.
That's in the interior of the car. Do you see that?
Yes.
Again, 6 is out from the scene, that CSA Forbing took. States Exhibit 100, do you see that same defect, but actually a little bit clearer now that all the glass has fallen out?
Yes, I do.
Would that be consistent with a shot going into the vehicle?
It would appear so.
But again, just to reiterate, had you gone out to the scene at this point in time, based on what you've reviewed, there have been no determination that you've been able to make regarding the back left driver's side or the rear window, correct?
That is correct.
I'll pass witness.
Thank you. Ms. York?
Just briefly, Your Honor. Ms. Lozano, I know we talked, and I'm not gonna beat a dead horse, but the travel from the scene to the auto pound, causing damage to the window, same thing would happen for any movement to the car, or even just shutting the door. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that is.
Slamming the car door could cause all of the glass to come down before you could even look at it.
It could, depending on how the structure of that glass is set up in there.
I'll pass this witness.
Anything further, Mr. Adams?
There you are.
Ms. York? Anything further?
No, ma'am.
All right, so may this witness be released?
No objection.
Okay.
All right, you may step down. Thank you. Thank you. You may call your next witness.
At this time, Your Honor, the state will call Dr. Dyer.
You can stand. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
If you please raise your right hand for me. Do you so solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
All right, thank you. You may be seated. And as you know, doctor, the chair moves side to side and the microphone moves up and down.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Adams?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Doctor. Could you please introduce yourself to this jury and state your name for the record and spell your name as well?
My name is Tracy Dyer, Tracydyder. I am a forensic pathologist.
And can you please tell this jury just a little bit about your training and experience to become an educational background to become a forensic pathologist?
Sure. I went to a small school in Kansas called Pittsburgh State for my undergraduate degree. Then I attended law school at the University of Kansas. After I obtained my law degree, I joined the Navy and was a Navy judge advocate for about 5 years. When I finished my service with the Navy, I did a career change and went to medical school in Oregon at Oregon Health Sciences University. That's 4 years, and then I did an additional 4 years of training in what's called pathology residency. And that is where you learn how to do autopsies, you look at surgical specimens for tumor, you learn about blood banking, toxicology, all those sorts of things. I finished all of those educational pursuits and took a series of board examinations to be board certified in anatomic and clinical pathology. And I came here to Dallas for 1 additional year of training, specifically in forensic pathology, which is where we learn to determine cause and manner of death for people who die suddenly and unexpectedly. After I finished my fellowship, I stayed here in Dallas as a medical examiner. I was a staff medical examiner, and then I was the deputy chief medical examiner. And a few months ago, I retired from that position And now I am doing some consulting and private work in the field of forensic pathology.
You have a lot of education. And congratulations on the retirement. And welcome back to Dallas. And thank you. I know you're on vacation right now, but thank you for coming back and joining us. I want to take you back to May of 2020. During the peak of COVID, I guess. And I know you all were extremely busy. But at that time, were you medical examiner with the Western Institute of Forensic Sciences?
Yes.
Okay. As far as your duties and responsibilities at that time, what was your role as the deputy chief?
As the deputy chief medical examiner, I did all of the duties of a medical examiner, which was I did autopsies, I signed death certificates, I testified, trained people who were interested in becoming forensic pathologists, and then I had some additional administrative duties, scheduling and dealing with personnel matters and that sort of thing.
And during your time at the Southwest Institute of Forensic Sciences, how many autopsies do you think you've performed?
In total over my career, I haven't done an exact count, but probably between 7,000 and 8,000.
And have you testified as an expert in this field before?
Yes. Many times.
And now you're, of course, you've started your own consulting firm, Lone Star Autopsy. We have flown you back from your vacation. And we're going to pay you whatever the Dallas County going rate is for a testifying expert. I don't know exactly what that is, but.
That's correct. I mean, in my capacity as a private consultant, I have a charge, but I'm taking less for this because it was a case I did with the office, so I'm just charging what the medical examiner's charge is, whatever that office rate is.
Okay. And you and I actually met before I knew that you were going to be retiring, and we'd already prepared for this.
That's correct.
Now, can you explain to the jury, first off, I know you kind of mentioned what an autopsy is, or what you do, but can you explain what an autopsy is, what the steps are, how you perform an autopsy, how a body is received? Can you walk them through this process?
Absolutely. So a call comes into the office and an investigator will take the basic information that we receive that someone is deceased. If they are deceased at a scene, then an investigator from the medical examiner's office will actually go out, do a scene investigation, and take photos. In some cases, the person is transported to the hospital, like in this case, so we don't send out a scene investigator. The body then comes to the medical examiner's office. It's assigned a unique identifying number. We do that in every case because sometimes IDs aren't accurate or we don't even have an identification for an individual. So everyone gets a number so that we can track everything associated with the case with that number. The individual then is x-rayed, especially in homicides where we're concerned about sharp implements or projectiles within the body so we can identify those. We then start the process of the autopsy. We'll document clothing, then we'll document identifying characteristics, eye color, hair color, tattoos, scars, anything like that. That's all part of an external examination. We will look at particular injuries on the body at that point as well and document those with photographs and on a diagram. After all of that information is complete, we will do the internal part of the autopsy, which consists of opening the major body cavities, looking at the organs, seeing what has been injured, seeing if there's any evidence of natural disease, as well as taking samples for toxicology.
Once you've done all of that, Judge, can we have French?
You may. stretch break, and get us some things to revitalize us, because I know we're going to, this witness is probably gonna take a little longer than most. And so if you wanna go, get a drink or anything like that, we'll do that at this time, so that once we start up, we can, keep it going. I know people are looking at those clocks, I think they need batteries. So, I think they have wrong times.
That one's.
Oh, that one's right, okay. So, go ahead and take that, 10-minute break. Like I said, feel free to bring in, any kind of, drinks or whatever you may want, to, keep you alert, so that we can get through our last witness for today. All right, thank you.
All rise.
They're all be seated. And doctor, if you want to step down, you can just.
I even brought an extra witness up here today. Come on, I should've known. Should've known. The only thing I haven't shown you.
Mr. Adams, you were about to proceed with your direct examination, correct?
Yes, Your Honor. And Doctor, kind of where we left off, you just described the process of receiving a body, how it comes in, photographing, documenting, x-raying, then going into the autopsy process, and is all of that documented with photos and with a report that's made at or near the time of the autopsy?
Yes,
And does that have your final conclusions and findings and cause of death and manner of death inside the autopsy report?
yes, it does.
And did you do that in this case?
Yes,
Now, since you are no longer working for Swiss, I do not believe you have access to the complete copy of your file, including your investigative narrative, so if you need that, I'm happy to provide that with you. Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
I'm showing you, Doctor, what we've previously gone over as State's Exhibit number 127. Will you please take a look at that and let me know if you recognize it?
yes, I do.
What is State's Exhibit number 127?
It's a copy of the autopsy report I prepared in this case, along with a hand diagram that I wrote out for this case, and the cause of death report sheet, which just indicates the initial assessment of what the cause and manner was going to be in this case.
And that's State's Exhibit 127 and 128.
Yes.
Let me see what's been marked as State's Exhibit 6, 129, 130 through 136. So State's Exhibit 6, 129 through 136. Do you please review those?
Yes.
What are State's Exhibits 6 through 136? Or sorry, 6, 129 through 136.
6, as well as 129 through 134 are photographs that I took during this case. 135 is the radiograph, and 136 is a photograph of the projectile that I recovered in this case.
And you talked earlier about a unique identifying number that is specific with each case that you work. What is that number? In general, like, what do you call it?
It's the identification number.
The IFS number?
Yes.
Okay. And are those contained within the report and within each photograph that you have?
Yes.
I'm showing you what's been marked as 510, which is in a Manila folder. And the contents, which are going to be, in Your Honor, I would like to change 510, which was the Manila folder previously admitted for record purposes, to 510A. And the contents of 510A will be State's Exhibit 510. So 510A was previously admitted now for record purposes, and the contents therein would be 510. Do you recognize State's Exhibit 510?
Yes.
What is State's Exhibit 510?
This is the envelope that I placed the bullet in that I recovered from the decedent. And it's got my handwriting indicating all of that material, as well as one of the barcodes that we use with the unique identifying number on there.
Very good. And those photos, that projectile bullet that was recovered from the autopsy, as well as your reports and your cause of death, would these all be useful in aiding your testimony today in front of this jury?
Yes.
State would offer State's Exhibit 6, 129, sorry, 6, 127 through 136 for all purposes, and State's Exhibit 510 for all purposes.
objection, Your Honor.
Okay, so State's Exhibit number 6 that was previous for record only is now entered for all purposes. And then State's Exhibits 127 through 136 are admitted. And then State's Exhibit 510A is admitted, and State's Exhibit 510 will be admitted.
Judge, just so the record's clear, 510A is just for
Yes,
record
I'm
purposes.
sorry, 510A, I'm sorry. 510A is for record purposes, and 510, the contents that are within 510A are for all purposes.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
Okay, now, doctor, this computer, or this screen is 4x3, not full, so you might need to look to your right, but State's Exhibit, and I'm gonna provide you with State's Exhibit 127, so you actually have
That'd probably be easier.
as well as the photos.
Okay.
Walking through, State's Exhibit 127, specifically on the first page, what is the information that is contained that you put on the first page of an autopsy report?
As you can see at the top, we have the identifying information for the decedent, Leslie Baker in this case, her age, gender, race, date of birth, as well as the date of death and the time of death, and then the date that we performed the autopsy. Body characteristics, again, weight and height in essence, as well as we list all the organ weights up front. Those are obviously done as part of the internal exam, which we document later in the report. Then we have the external exam, which I described, which will talk about anything that the individual is received with, the clothing, etc., and then identifying characteristics.
So when the body is received for autopsy purposes, external examination first as is, then cleaned up, then you start from the outside and work your way inside. But here, some information contained therein is the weight of the organs, which would have been from the internal examination, which is further down the line.
That's correct. We always start with what are called as-is photographs, where we just document the individual exactly how we received them, top half and bottom half.
And just for the record purposes and the purposes of your testimony, we got together and we worked down the number of photos just to a small manageable portion that would be relevant, and for the purposes of publishing in front of this jury, we have blocked out some parts of the photos,
Yes,
although the entirety will be contained in the record.
yes.
Moving on here to the second page of State's Exhibit number 127, specifically at the top, when you talk about evidence of treatment, what did you observe as far as the treatment that was provided to Ms. Baker?
Oh, it appeared she had been to the hospital and there had been attempts at saving her life. She had an endotracheal tube, commonly known as an ET tube. She had access lines for fluids or blood. She had what's called a thoracotomy incision, where the surgeons basically open the left side of your chest to try to stimulate your heart that way. So she obviously had had some medical treatment in an attempt to save her.
Medical treatment in addition to CPR or general field CPR that an officer might perform,
Correct,
or even DFR might perform.
yes.
The tracheal tube maybe with DFR, but the other stuff would be from at the hospital.
Yes, a thoracotomy incision would be done at the hospital.
As far as the evidence of injury, what did you notate as far as the evidence of injury?
So I described 2 gunshot wounds, but I'll say up front, I'm not sure that they were 2 separate bullets. I described them separately because one involved the right arm and one involved the chest. But it could have been a continuation of the same bullet from the right arm into the chest. Or it could have been 2 separate shots. I'm not able to tell that just by looking at the autopsy. So I described 2 gunshot wounds, and the one I called number 1 was a gunshot wound to the chest.
And going through this, you also have representative photos that you use a diagram to show the body, and I forget the positioning,
Anatomic position.
an anatomic position.
Yeah.
You don't know what position the person was in, you don't know the situation under which they were killed, you were just making your medical findings.
Yes, I mean, we have an investigative narrative, so we usually have some basic information. I mean, I was told that before I started the autopsy that the individual was shot while sitting in a car, so I had that documented.
And that can help aid you in your findings.
Yes.
Okay, so going through the first notated gunshot wound that you observed being on the chest, what did you specifically observe?
So there was a round entrance wound on the right side of the chest. The bullet went into the right side of the chest. It fractured a rib on the right side, went through the right lung, then it crossed over into the left side of the chest, went through the heart, went through the left lung, went into an area between the ribs on the left side, and that's where I recovered a bullet, was from the left side of the chest.
So, right to left, and actually recovered on
On the left side,
the left side.
yes.
As far as the damage from the bullet, what did you observe as far as damage to the internal organs of Ms. Bacon?
Well, a bullet passing through both of your lungs, and most importantly your heart, is not going to be a survivable injury. You know, especially the heart, there will be extensive hemorrhaging internally into the body cavities from that. And in fact, there was 750 milliliters of blood in the right pleural space, and there was 550 in the left pleural space, but that was also, I don't know the exact amount that would have been there because of the medical treatment where the surgeons opened the chest. So there might have been more to begin with.
As far as this injury and this gunshot wound to the chest, how long would you expect someone to be able to survive after suffering this type of gunshot wound?
As I indicated, I don't think that it would have been a survivable injury. It went through multiple walls of the heart. On the other hand, it was not by any stretch a instantaneous death. There would have had to have been time for the bleeding to take place. Probably minutes would be a fair assessment.
The second gunshot wound. Explain your findings on that, please.
So the second gunshot wound was on what we call the lateral right arm, the outside portion of the arm. And basically it just went through the soft tissues of the arm and came out the inside of the right arm, which is why I indicated that might be a continuation of the gunshot wound then into the chest. But I can't tell that just from the autopsy, especially somebody sitting in a car, if they have their hands up or their arms that are in a different placement. It might have been two gunshot wounds.
Moving to the third page of the autopsy. First of all, can you talk about pseudo-stippling on the third page?
So one of the things we do as forensic pathologists with gunshot wounds is we're always looking for gunshot residue that might be around entrance wounds. Soot and stippling are the two types of gunshot residue that we look at. And those determine if a gun was what we consider close, which is within just a couple of inches, or what we'll call a medium range where there's stippling, where the gun might have been a foot to 2 feet away from the person when the gun was fired. I did not see soot or stippling on the wounds in this case, but there were similar types of abrasions on different parts of Ms. Baker's body, and that is what we call pseudo-stippling. So it's basically small red abrasions, marks on the skin, where the skin was struck by something. Basically what I'm saying is there was probably an interposed target or some other substance that struck her. Glass would be a typical finding in a case like this. If somebody was shot through glass, the glass fragments could strike the body and create these kind of marks, which we call pseudo-stippling because we want to differentiate that from real stippling from a gun.
And that's from a gun, it's the burning.
Yes, for true stippling, yes.
If you have the close enough contact, not contact, if there was close enough the body to the muzzle of the firearm, when the gun shoots, it would create a burning, which would leave that stippling.
Yes, it's very small, very tiny red marks. The marks in this case are much larger and more irregular, which is why they're more consistent with pseudostippling, plus they're not right around the entrance wound.
And again, we're talking about the evidence of injury. This is all under the evidence of injury. You said that the gunshot wound to the chest would not have been survivable. A lot of times we talk about, had Ms. Baker been on the operating table when she received this gunshot wound to the chest, would that have been survivable?
I doubt it. There was just too much damage to the heart tissue.
In the second gunshot wound, or what you label it as the second gunshot wound, being the gunshot wound to the right arm, survivable, but you'd still want to seek treatment.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, being shot through the muscle of your arm, I mean, you could bleed significantly. You would absolutely need to seek medical treatment, but it would not necessarily be fatal on its own.
Pseudo-stippling, not fatal.
No.
I guess unless you left it completely untreated and let it become gangrene.
So, yeah, something very
Okay.
unusual. Yeah.
As far as the evidence that was submitted, would this be just the evidence that you actually, or your investigator actually collect from an autopsy?
Yes.
Now on the, I think it's the fourth page, we have some other internal stuff, toxicology report. My eyes are going terrible. I believe she was a .02 or 0.002. She was below the legal limit but had some alcohol in her. But
Yes.
as far as what you observed inside on your internal examination of Ms. Baker, how would you describe her health?
She was an otherwise healthy adult female. She had no obvious natural disease process.
And of course, during this time on page 5, I believe it is, we had a COVID test. She was negative for COVID. Okay, moving on to page 6. Here's where you have your findings and conclusions, and we'll talk about the photos here in a second. Again, these are just a shortened version of what we've already discussed, but regarding gunshot wound number 1, what were the findings?
The main finding was the gunshot wound to the chest and the description of the injuries, the perforation of the ribs, the lungs, and the heart, and then the recovery of the bullet. I specified that the direction of the bullet is always in 3 dimensions, so in this case it's right to left, it's slightly front to back, and downward.
And so, right to left, so if this pointer is the bullet, it would be right to left, slightly downward, and
Downward and slightly front to back, which would be difficult for you to do.
just like, like that. Kind of, sort of, like that.
Pretty close.
Okay. I'm not in an anatomical position, I guess. But, so, and then we also had the rib that was broken. Was that on the right side or the left side?
They're right.
Did you notice anything as far as like the bullet breaking apart inside the body due to that, or going way off course, or did it kind of continue on that path the whole way?
No, the path was pretty straight. It didn't break up.
And then ultimately, what were your conclusions regarding this gunshot?
So the conclusion statement is that the cause of death was a gunshot wound to the chest.
And what was the manner of the death?
The manner is homicide.
As far as what we see here, you're the first doctor to sign, and then on the following pages, if the jury goes through it, they'll see all the other doctors with source have signed off as well.
Yes.
Is that just commonplace?
Yes, we always review each other's homicides at least to make sure that everybody's in agreement as to the cause and manner of death.
Here on, it's the very last page of your autopsy of 127, we see that diagram in that position that we've discussed. And this is the positioning that you would use on any homicide case other than male or female in regards to the diagram, correct?
Yes, we always diagram in this, which is considered the anatomic position.
And again, here you see labeling of gunshot wound number 1, gunshot wound number 2, and then you have the word exit and entrance, and those are notated by circles and X's, correct?
Correct.
Finally, State's Exhibit 128 is just a cause of death report, and you testified this is the initial report that you put out.
Yes.
So now we're going to go through the photos. We're going to go past the State's Exhibit number 6, which is but can you explain to the jury what State's Exhibit number 6 is again?
Yes, that's just the identification photo. We take the unique identifying number and the decedent's face for ID purposes.
Okay, State's Exhibit number 129, what do we have here?
So this would be one of those as-is photographs that I discussed. This is the first photograph we take indicating basically how the decedent was received. So you can see she has the medical treatment. She has paper bags on her hands, which we request be done at hospitals in order to preserve any evidence that might be under the fingernails or on the hands themselves. And she was still wearing some clothing.
State's Exhibit 130, what do we have here?
So this is the entrance wound on the lateral right arm. You can see it's a round, punched out looking gunshot wound entrance. And there's no residue around it. There's no soot or stippling around the wound.
State's Exhibit number 131.
So this photograph I took to show that the gunshot wound entrance on the arm, but also the one on the chest. And you can see potentially how they might have lined up to be one gunshot wound in proximity to each other. And the entrance on the lateral right side of the chest is the one that resulted in the shot through the lungs and the heart.
Now, in regards to the redness that we see on gunshot wound number 1, the one that's on the chest, do you have any possibilities for what might have caused that type of redness around that entrance wound?
It might have been, well, I don't know that there would have been any sort of medical treatment. I was thinking it might be something with medical treatment, but I don't think it's related to the actual gunshot wound.
If somebody had their arm up against their chest and was in the driving position, hypothetically, could that, if you have the skin-to-skin contact, could you have something like that occur?
Yes, you could have that. There's a phenomenon where if the skin is tightly up against another part of the body, or say a door, or somebody's laying flat on their back with pressure, you can get that sort of almost bruised look around a secondary wound like that.
So it would be consistent in this case then if you had the victim in a car, hands on the wheel, arm against chest, bullet goes through the outer right bicep, inner right bicep, and then enters the chest. And if she were to be in this position, that could cause this type of redness or bruising.
It could.
Now, in State's Exhibit number 132, what do we see here?
And that's the exit wound on the arm. So all three wounds have a general round appearance, but the outer one is the entrance, this is the exit, and then either the secondary wound or the re-entry, as we would call it, if they're all associated.
State's Exhibit number 133, what do we see here?
So this is the back of her right forearm and hand, and all of those red marks are the pseudostippling that I described. So they're not, the same sort of tiny punctate little marks. Some of them are bigger and more irregular, some of them are smaller, which would be consistent with some sort of interposed target striking the skin and causing those little abrasions.
Now, you didn't notate anywhere in your autopsy report or anywhere by photographing any pseudostippling on the interior of her arm, on the forearm side or on the palm of her hand, correct?
Correct.
All of the pseudostippling, at least as it concerns the right arm, was on the exterior side of the palm or the hand of the forearm, correct?
Yes.
would that be consistent with somebody sitting in a driver's seat and being shot through a window and the glass hitting that form?
Yes.
State's exhibit number 134, what do we see here?
So this was some additional pseudostippling on the right thigh, but as you can see, much more sparse, just a few.
And then state's exhibit 1, and reason for being more sparse, possibly material of pants or.
Yes, absolutely. If somebody's got clothing, that could affect the distribution pattern of something like that.
Same thing goes for regular stippling or soot or any, when you have from a firearm, but here we're saying it's from glass or potentially glass.
Yes,
Clothing can make it less dense.
yes.
State's exhibit 135, what do we have here?
This is basically a picture of an X-ray, a radiograph, and you can see a wire there that was associated with medical treatment on the right side of the chest. But you can see the bullet on the left side of the chest, very far lateral. It's the round, very opaque object. Yes. That was the bullet. We always take radiographs before we start an autopsy, and then part of the process is to recover that object.
State's exhibit number 136,
And this was the bullet that I recovered from the left chest.
which is contained within state's exhibit number 510.
Yes.
Oh. Is a firearm a deadly weapon?
Yes.
Is it capable of causing serious bodily injury or death?
Yes.
I'll pass witness.
All right, Ms. Euro?
Thank you. Dr. Dyer, you're not here to tell this jury, even after all the hypotheticals, that you have any idea how her arm was or anything like that.
I can't say that definitively.
I think you testified that the information you had is just that she was sitting in a car, but even sitting in a car at the time of the offense, you don't even know if she was sitting. Fair to say?
Yes, that's fair to say.
And you don't know why the shooting occurred?
No.
You're just here to tell the jury as to what the injuries were.
Yes.
And on the injury that was on her arm, there's no downward or upward deviation. Is that correct?
I do not believe that I indicated any. Oh, wait, let me look at the arm. Actually, I said it was right to left, slightly front to back, and without up down.
And in regards to any of that, that all is just on the basic model is what you're looking at. When you're talking about up and down, you're talking about the anatomical position, and that's just from that starting point.
Yes, whenever we do directions, it's based on measurements that we do on the body in anatomic position.
And when we talk about hypotheticals, you wouldn't be able to testify as to any sort of significance of if she was bending down, if the shooter had squatted down. You don't have any of that to tell us. If he was running, if he was standing still, if he was following a car. You don't have anything to help assist the jury with any of that being.
As far as hypotheticals, my perspective is just to say, if I'm proposed one, whether that scenario is consistent or inconsistent with my findings.
And so if there was somebody that was sitting on the ground and put a gun a little higher in order to get it the right height, they could have shot it like that. That's a hypothetical that would work for you.
Well, that's a hypothetical, and then I could indicate whether I thought that was consistent or inconsistent.
Correct. And so consistent or inconsistent just has to do with the entry of the bullet into the different locations of the body, whether front to back, right to left, up or down. All of that tells you is how the bullet entered and the trajectory it had.
It is primarily the trajectory. It could also be range of fire or other findings during the course of the autopsy.
Not in this case, though.
possibly in this case, sure.
Did you have anything that gave you range of fire or distance?
Well, the absence of soot or stippling is an indication of range or fire.
Well, the absence of stippling could also be if there was an intervening factor, an intervening medium between the gun and the body, correct?
An intervening factor can change a range of fire determination as well, yes.
And so that also, again, comes down to, you're not here to tell the jury anything definitive about how anybody was or where they were, how they were positioned,
I do not have that information, no.
or why it happened.
No.
I'll pass this witness.
Mr. Adams?
Nothing from the state, I just asked that she be excused for all purposes.
I have no objections for all purposes.
All right. Well, you are dismissed. We have no further questions for Dr. Dyer, correct? You may be excused, and you are finally excused so that I guess you can catch a flight.
I might, thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as promised, that will be our last witness for today. We will start back again tomorrow. Bailiff will give you instruction, but if you can be in the jury room by 8:30, and between 8:30 and 8:45, once again, we will try to get started as soon as we can, barring I don't have any outside people who come in again today. But I will see you in the morning.
All right.
Now we're live in the court.
Can some of that get in?
And so what I've had to
Oh,
do,
no, you're right, I'm sorry.
like if we start back early, I have to green screen
Is everything for
and
that?
then start.
Wait, hold on. We got another check, we need to.
And I don't think all that's supposed to be happening, right?
My vote is it's a firmware issue.
You think so? Well, my husband were here, he would say it's user error, that's what he said. He does IT, so he calls everything user error.
It's always a firmware.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Reboot. Our IT guy says the computer will only do what you tell it
287
to
is
do.
all.
Yes.
Well, I keep telling it to work and it's not working.
Yeah.
I tell you, this has been a Monday, what is it, a Monday?
Yes. And then all of your A's are for record purposes, except for the one that holds the bullet, which is actually, the smaller envelope so you have the big one, but then the smaller one.
Yes, all the A's are in. It should be in, it should be 510 is all.
513, 514.
513 through 525. 524. I don't know how to get her phone in.
I didn't have an opportunity to check the Cisco version yet.
No.
I was worried about it.
We've talked about it.
All right, now we're done.
All the evidence is locked up, Judge. Sure.
Oh, you got everything?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am, so I will see you
No,
tomorrow. 8:30, my seat will be in the seat.
I'm done.
Well, yours might need to be on.
Oh, yes, of course.
I'll bring you some goldfish
I'll see you.
tomorrow.
Yeah,
All right.
510 and then 513.
And Mo, you had no.
No goldfish.
Look, you know how I am when I get bored. I'm like, yo, let's keep this moving.
No, but you're like, could you give her some candy, please?
I was feeling very much like our sleeping juror.
But I felt, but I felt bad for her.
Do a
because
dance
I don't
or
know if y'all
something.
looked, but the other jurors, everybody kept looking at her all the time at some point.
Who?
The juror that was sleeping.
Oh, it's amazing. I was the dude in the black shirt.
Well, no, you missed the lady in the green shirt.
Oh, I can't see her.
As they're walking out, she makes eye contact with me and she goes, and I was like, you know, ma'am, be nice to your fellow.
Well, the last trial I was in, I had a juror that was sleeping, and the judge told the jurors around him, when you see him asleep, you nudge him, get him up. Don't let him sleep.
I'm gonna
It's like from the show,
tell,
the jury.
And they did.
Cal, that's a good suggestion. Mo said the last trial she was in, we'll tell the jurors tomorrow, if they see their fellow neighbor, maybe not, maybe they just kick them a little bit or.
And then you won't be able to bring
nudge
the
them,
fight.
not cheat
It'll
them.
help us keep the trial moving.
You know, or have one of them clear their throat really.
And I'm over there breaking up a fight. Yeah. We could have
Well,
been.
I wanna see
You
that.
remember the jury they wouldn't let back in the room there?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we want, kicking each other to wake them up, yeah.
We could bring
We had
one
that.
more witness.
What you hear?
Which one was it?
That shit.
Commander, the first one?
No.
No.
No, it was the,
No.
it was the sexual assault.
Yeah, it was sexual assault. They refused to let him
So
back.
he
They
didn't
both
wanna
went all
agree
out.
with him, and we walked back there, he was just pacing the hall. You gotta
They said they wanted me.
kick him out.
You know what, that's when my phone starts ringing.
Luckily, we had alternates. Luckily, nobody opposed any of it, but I've never seen a person get voted off the island. Matter of fact, I think he was an alternate already, so everybody's like, we're good.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't know it, but all